Our planet Earth is a vast, amazing space home to 7.7 billion people, approximately half of whom are female. And yet, women have struggled to attain equality for centuries, fighting for equal pay, equal rights, and equal recognition. The focus has never been on surpassing the achievement level of our male counterparts or minimizing the input of men in the economic, fiscal, environmental, and social successes of each country worldwide. Instead, in some corners of the world, women are simply struggling to ensure that there is a seat for them at the table and that they are able to care responsibly for themselves and their families while contributing to the development of the community at large. How can we ensure that collectively we pursue gender equity and equality throughout this unprecedented pandemic and into the 2030 United Nations benchmark year for attaining sustainability? If we look at the history of Caribbean women, for example, we see the progress from the early 1900s to today. It is significant to note that Caribbean women played an important part in service during World War II, from 1939 to 1945. In their book, West Indian Women at War, Ben Bousquet and Colin Douglas stress that during that time, a woman's place was in the war, and that out of necessity, women were slowly admitted into the armed forces and other bastions of male employment. This shows us that in times of crisis, women are expected to perform in wider roles in order to stabilize conditions and normalize the societies in which they reside. Like World War II, COVID-19 has been a global crisis of epic proportions. The incidents of gender-based violence have increased. Education has suffered due primarily to the closure of schools. Unemployment figures have dramatically climbed. Non-emergency health issues for women have been largely under-resourced as the focus has shifted to minimizing the damaging impact of the pandemic. And poverty indicators pinpoint that there is widespread and extreme hardship throughout most countries of the world. In a statement dated May 28, 2020, the United Nations Sustainable Development Group for Latin America and the Caribbean referred to COVID-19 as a crisis of unparalleled magnitude and proportion, and highlighted that the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted, either directly or indirectly, millions of people in Latin America and the Caribbean, and refugees and migrants, especially women and children, are the most affected. We should also note comments provided by Constanza Tabush through UN Women in January of this year. The latest data shows that the pandemic is poised to push 47 million women and girls into extreme poverty, increasing the total number of women and girls living in extreme poverty to 435 million. The projections also show that this number will not revert to pre-pandemic levels until 2030. We must consider the findings of a report commissioned by UNICEF and UNDP, released in the third quarter of 2020. The pandemic is setting back progress made in the past 2 decades to improve women and children's health in these regions. So, how can we collectively help to shape the future of our women and girls in both the current and post-pandemic environments? As president of the Halo Foundation registered in Antigua and Barbuda, the youth team, Generation Y, comprised of 80% female volunteers, has been playing its small part to alleviate suffering and damage. The initiatives include teaming up with a local psychologist to provide free assessment and initial counseling for young people with mental health issues. 50% of the cases to date have been girls seeking treatment. The second initiative has been a continuous Big Sister program, where young disadvantaged females are mentored by the young ladies of Halo Generation Y. And finally, the female youth team has devised an action plan for addressing women's health issues. An outreach project which is scheduled to commence shortly. They will be looking first at polycystic ovarian syndrome, a condition which displays symptoms such as obesity, stress, and depression. Tamisha Lee, president of Jamaican Network of Rural Women Producers, commented that a post-COVID-19 world will require women who are robust, flexible, and empowered to think and act. We need to continue to give women and girls the opportunity to make their voices heard. I had the good fortune to be one of the judges at a recent International Women's Day debate competition organized by the Ministry of Social Transformation in Antigua and Barbuda. And it is this type of activity that helps to provide young women with the courage and competence to face a future with all its challenges and uncertainties. On the global stage, the efforts to advance the gender equality agenda for women must not only be continued, but should intensify in order to reverse the retrogressive effects of COVID-19. The question of women in leadership should be prioritized at all high-level meetings, including the G7, COP26, and Commonwealth Heads of Government. In a recent speech to mark International Women's Day, Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Baroness Patricia Scotland, remarked that there is sufficient data to show that out of a sample of countries with similar socio-demographic and economic characteristics that were seen as important in the transmission of COVID-19, countries headed by women did considerably better than those headed by their male counterparts. The Secretariat's guide on measures for advancing and enabling women's political representation in the Commonwealth is expected to become available in 2021 and should prove a useful resource in the journey for progressive female leadership. Every country in the world should pursue legal reform or enforcement where the lives and livelihood of women and girls are marginalized in areas such as citizenship and the informal economy of unpaid work, domestic violence, sexual offenses, health, equality in remuneration, and equal opportunity employment. Continuous research is needed in order to monitor the success of strategy and the advancement of the agenda. This should include studies executed by government entities, universities, women's organizations, and religious institutions. The UN Women and UNDP COVID-19 Global Gender Response Tracker will generate a vast amount of gender-driven data across 206 countries. Benchmarking and rating are necessary scorecards in order to meet gender-related objectives. Education is key to ensuring effective leadership training for women and girls in both formal and community settings. The use of technology in providing solutions to critical issues such as poverty alleviation is encouraged. Electronic cash transfers for project funding is a good example of how women can be positively and directly impacted by technological advancement. Similarly, social media and other electronic platforms provide the medium for targeted message delivery and awareness, and we should continue to voice our collective and poignant mission to dissolve the inequality between men and women in our effort to make the world a more peaceful, protected, and productive space. Last but not least, investment in projects which aim to benefit women is critical. The general belief is that men tend to invest while women tend to donate. A UN Women article indicates that in 2021, for every 100 men who are poor, there are 118 impoverished women. This implies that 54% of the world's poor are women. The situation has improved as in 2004, just 17 years ago, new gender studies from Cameroon and the Caribbean cites women as being 70% of the world's poor. Barbados's first female prime minister, the Honorable Mia Mottley, says, "As we are now seeing with global responses to the COVID-19 crisis, the international multilateral system is faltering. There is a dearth of moral leadership, a resurgence of nationalism, and competition between nations, all struggling to deal with their own problems. Now is not the time for division. Now is not the time for exclusion. It is the time for togetherness and collective advancement, and the nations of the world need to embrace the vision of a brighter and better future for all. In reference to COVID-19, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, "We are in this together and we will get through this together. Let us ensure that gender parity issues are resolved by 2030 in order to balance the equation of poverty, justice, and success, with women and girls playing a greater part in the global narrative towards achievement." May I take this opportunity to commend the organizers on this initiative, which is undoubtedly an important think tank and discussion arena for the empowerment of women. I wish you all a productive conference as we look forward to an even more prosperous future for women and girls in each of our respective countries.